that's the end of the cross-examination part. So we're now going to have a 5-minute conclusion speech. First up is Grant.
All right, well, thank you very much, and thanks to this debate for teaching me I need shoes with better traction. That having been said, the first question that controls is, what is Bruce defending? Because he needed to provide a moral framework. Because after all, this debate was whether a particular thing is ethical. As a consequence, we need to have some sense of what things are ethical and what things aren't. All he's saying is, well, maybe the world would be better off if this thing didn't happen. Look, there are a lot of things that might exist in this world that we might be better off if they didn't exist. But that doesn't mean that they're unethical. Like, the world might be better off if we eliminated all drugs, alcohol, any gratuitous, unprotected sex, or anything Glenn Beck says. But that doesn't mean that those particular things are unethical by virtue of the fact that they exist. He doesn't get to win by making intuitive emotional appeals. Oh, wouldn't it be bad if we burned a cat's tail? Oh, look at those horrible things that they did in that one slaughterhouse one time in a video that I'm sure was cherry-picked to find the most gruesome images, right? The relevant question is this action intrinsically unethical? So we said in our first speech, look, provide us with a framework that can adjudicate the claim, is a particular action unethical? His response, well, I'm just going to continue to assert that it is. No, you don't get to do that. You have to tell us how you are adjudicating whether particular things are unethical and whether things aren't. You have to provide a coherent framework, and he hasn't. We also tell you that it's a serious problem given all of the problems that we pointed out with the unethical framework. He's never told us what we would do if we could destroy a particular species of tree in the rainforest, and the result would be reducing the suffering of millions of people. He's never told us what to do, given that that entailed a conflict between his two moral imperatives, one of which is reduce suffering, the other of which is protect the environment. We have no clue what to do in that circumstance. We also told you the framework is utterly unexhaustive. Like, according to his framework, I guess it would be fine to lie, cheat, and steal because I'm not doing any of the things that he says are so important. We clearly don't think that way. He could have had a different debate if he wanted to. He could have asked the question, well, would the world be better off if things that we don't like didn't exist? Different question from this question. He needed to have a coherent moral framework. He also tells us, well, this causes global warming. Okay, lots of things cause global warming, and we don't think necessarily that they're unethical. A lot of us probably drove here. Is that unethical? Also, this building causes global warming. Is that unethical? Methane gas causes global warming. Should we ban college students from eating pizza? I mean, come on. What necessarily? Lots of things cause global warming. It doesn't mean that all of them are unethical. He also says, well, no, lots of people are suffering and miserable. So, unfortunately, he didn't deal with their arguments about how often it's the case that if you just dump. So, first off, we said that all of this food that goes to feed livestock wouldn't exist, given that corporations, agribusinesses are profit-seeking entities. They just won't produce the food that they would otherwise exist. They just give it to the poor. But moreover, if we actually did dump all of the agriculture that we had onto the third world, we told you it would actually increase suffering in the long run. You need to give us some temporal reason why we should care about reducing suffering in the short term over the long term, if what we actually care about is developing agribusinesses within those areas and making sure that they have sustainably existing economies. Never told us a response to that. We also told you that famine is often a problem of the poor losing access to food, not a dearth of food, and he's never told us why that is a problem. He also tells us animals feel pain and dogs think like us. Look, yes, we recognize there is, if a society wanted to eat dogs, it would be entirely unethical for it to do so. We are allowed to decide in the United States that we don't want to eat dogs because we find them cute. It doesn't mean that it would be inherently unethical to eat dogs. So what we told you throughout, and we've never gotten a response, is that the rights inhere in rational agents, and we should protect those who are rational. He says animals feel pain. Well, what about human beings that don't feel pain? Are they unworthy of ethical considerations? But we also told you that what's really relevant is that these agents aren't moral actors. They don't make decisions in light of moral calculi. As a consequence, they're not entitled to these same considerations that we give humans. And this is when it gets really bad, when he tells us, no, I would enjoin all animal testing, which is interesting, because it might be the case he has found some studies that find that this would end up in no lives being lost. But given that there is empirical evidence to suggest otherwise, given that he would literally be willing to sacrifice the lives of humans so that some dogs or some cats or some monkeys are not, don't undergo pain is a serious problem because it suggests that he's willing to preference the moral considerations of animals over that of humans. We don't think that this is a reasonable position to take. We think it's obviously okay to say that we care about stopping the suffering of humans over animals, and we think that's incredibly important. But lastly, what's best for these animals? Look, we made the Posnerian argument that that we are just as much animals as anything else, and we are part of the natural biotic community. As a consequence, given that we've created these things that wouldn't exist but for the fact that we've raised them, we have to ask ourselves this question. Would we prefer that these things don't exist? Well, if we do care about animals living meaningful lives and not enduring pain, then given that existence is preferable to non-existence, it seems very strange to commit ourselves to a form of reasoning that would literally mean we would stop allowing these things to exist. Moreover, what's he going to do? Release them all and set them all free, as some of the more crazy keto people think, like literally liberate all the animals. Well, then they just die horrible deaths. They get eaten by cheetahs or whatever the hell happens. That's no better. So he's got to tell us what happens to these animals. Given that chickens would not exist in the numbers that they do if we didn't eat animals, you have to ask yourself, what are you going to do with them? Look, we told you that animals could live meaningful lives and be slaughtered painlessly. That there's nothing intrinsic to the act of consuming animals that entails animal cruelty. All he's told us is he's just going to continue to assert that we should care about particular things. He had to justify a moral framework. He had to deal with our thought experiments. He just doesn't get to win that, well, maybe the world would be a little bit better off if we didn't have that. Because that's not an ethical debate. That's something else we oppose.